Okay, we've made it to phase 4, and this is where it starts getting messy. So we've hopefully done enough completing the square problem so that you understand the process behind it. But what makes this messy is gonna creep up on us right in the beginning. Let's begin. This is not in the correct form. So the first thing I need to do is move my C value over to the right of the equal sign. So I'm going to add 7 over, and my equation is x squared plus 3x equals 7. The next thing I need to do is take half of my B value and then square it. That's the complete the square part. But here's my B. When I take half of 3, I do 3 divided by 2. And the one thing that you don't want to do is make that a decimal. This you want to leave in fraction form. So because it doesn't divide by 2 beautifully, you leave it as a fraction. Okay? So when I take half of my B value, I'm going to get 3 halves. And then I'm going to square it. So back to orange, x squared plus 3x. Now I have to square this. When you square 3 halves, you do 3 times 3 and 2 times 2. So that fraction is going to be 9 over 4. And you're going to add that to both sides of equals. I told you guys this was messy. The next thing is we're going to actually go ahead and complete the square. So that's where the squared is. And you know that by now, hopefully, that inside the parentheses, we are going to have 3 halves as our squared factor. And this side is where we have to do some fancy math. I don't know about fancy, but we got to do some math anyway. So what we have to do is we need to put the 7 over 1, and we need a common denominator. Our common denominator will be 4. So we're going to multiply top and bottom by 4 to get a common denominator. And this is going to rewrite to 28 fourths plus 9 fourths. Okay? So when we go ahead and add those up, 28 and 9 gives us 37 fourths. So that looks a little crowded, so I'm going to skip a space and I'm just going to rewrite it again. So when we go to do it, you're not confused about where anything came from or what it is. Let's do a quick recap. So we took half of 3, but that doesn't divide nicely, so we leave it as a fraction. Then we square it. So we do 3 times 3 and 2 times 2. That gives me 9 fourths. We're going to add 9 fourths to each side. When I complete the square on this side, we do that like normal. But on this side, what we need to do is we need to get a common denominator. And that means that we need to multiply top and bottom by 4 to get our 28 fourths. And when we combine those fractions, we get 37 fourths. So that's where we are right now. Now that we've completed the square, it's time for us to go into square root mode. So we're going to take the square to both sides. Okay, and when you do that, the parentheses fall out, so you should have x plus 3 over 2 equals, and on this side you're gonna have a plus or minus. Now check this out, okay? You're going to break this big square root into 2 little square roots, except I can take the square root of 4, which is the whole number 2, so that's going to be there. Okay, so recap, we took the square root, we should have a plus or minus. We are going to take the square root of 37, which is irrational, and then you're going to take the square root of 4, which is 2. Our last step, our 3 halves and our plus or minus radical 37 over 2 are not like terms, but they do have a common denominator, which means that when we subtract our 3 halves over to the right, our final answer is going to be -3 plus or minus square root of 37 all over 2, because this was over 2 and that was over 2, so they can share a denominator. So this is 2 irrational roots, which means that there will be a point on the x-axis for each of these, the plus and the minus, but it's going to be messy, which means it won't be a whole number. It'll be a rounded off value estimated. Okay, so phase 4, real messy. Let's go ahead and we'll take a look at our second example so you can see what it does. Again, what makes it messy is the fraction part. And I need you guys to get good at them. Okay? You don't have to like them, but you got to know how to work with them. All right, here it is. X squared minus 5x plus 2 equals 0. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to move the constant. Now this is a plus 2, so when I move it to the right, it's going to become a negative 2. So I'm going to have x squared minus 5x equals negative 2. If you're thinking that this is going to end up being a complex answer, this is an example of where I need you to really pay attention, because this doesn't mean it's a complex answer. We haven't completed the square yet. So we are ready to complete the square, which means I have to take half of my b value. Well, half of negative 5 is negative 5 over 2. Do not change it to a decimal. We're going to leave it as a fraction. And we are going to square it. So a negative times a negative is a positive. And you have, oops, this should be a minus 5x. 5 times 5 is 25, and 2 times 2 is 4. So this should be 25 fourths. And then on this end of the equation, we have negative 2 and then plus 25 fourths. Again, we got 25 fourths because we did half of negative 5 and then squared it. So negative times negative is positive. 5 times 5 is 25. 2 times 2 is 4. That's where that came from. So we're ready to do the complete the square step, which means we need parentheses with a squared term. And remember this part, I love doing this part because I know that it comes from that guy. So I'm just going to have x minus 5 over 2. It's always this guy. And then this one is where I need to do common denominator. So I'm going to put this negative 2 over 1. I'm going to multiply top and bottom by 4 to get that common denominator. And over here on the side, it gets negative 8 fourths plus 25 fourths. So this is really 25 minus 8. So that's what, 17? So this is going to end up being 17 fourths here. I'm going to skip a line and come down, so it's not all squishy. Now we can do the square root method. Square root, don't forget the plus or minus. Okay? And then the x minus 5 halves comes out. We've got plus or minus. We're going to keep that square root of 17, but the square root of 4 we can calculate. That's positive whole number 2. And when I add 5 halves to this side here, the 5 is positive, plus or minus, square root of 17, and both of them are over 2. And there's your answer. Now what I want you to do is I want you to try the practice problem, and then I'll see you in a minute.